Hi everyone, my name is Carla Gannon and I'm a middle school art teacher in Strongsville, Ohio. Today I'm going to teach you how to draw from observation to create this art supply still life. So I'm going to go over the materials that you need, starting with the still life that you're going to draw. So I just used an old soup can. Take the label off so you can see these great reflections and all the details, and then just some of your favorite art supplies. I love to add a ruler for some height so we can kind of make it a little bit more visually interesting. I added a pair of scissors, a yellow pencil, a Sharpie marker, and a large and small paintbrush. So in order to get these supplies in here, I'll show you a small trick that I learned. I stuffed this can with some old newspapers, just crinkled up, and the ruler needs to go in first because it's the tallest object, and then you can kind of place these in here and it'll give it a little bit more height so they won't all just sink to the bottom. And you got to play around with it a little bit, make sure they overlap nicely and you have a good composition that you like, and then choose how you want to draw it. After you set that up, you're going to need a piece of sheet of white paper. This is 9 by 12. And I'll be doing it vertical, portrait style, to get that ruler in here. You'll also need a pencil, a couple Sharpies. I have a medium and a large Sharpie. You'll also need some charcoal. I love the Vine charcoal. It's nice and thin, and it's just very light, so it's a little bit more difficult to mess up and get it too dark. For finishing, I have chalk pastels, I have Crayola markers. You can use crayons and colored pencils as well. Those will work wonderfully. And that's it for the supplies. Now that my art supply still life is set up, I'm ready to get started. I need a pencil and a piece of paper to sketch. Your supplies will vary a little bit from mine, so your supply portion will look a little bit different, but we're going to start with the basic cylinder, and those should all look the same. First thing I'm going to do is kind of eyeball the middle of the paper, and I'm just going to draw 2 dots on that plane. And this is going to be the top of the cylinder. So you'll see this is like an oval shape here. So I'm going to start by drawing a rainbow shape, sketching very lightly because a lot of these lines will be erased, and then a smiley face shape. I do this because that kind of ensures that you're going to have the right distance and it's going to be big enough, and you won't have to erase all of it if you use those guiding dots. Now coming down from those dots, I'm just going to draw straight line. Think of a piece of string hanging from this line for the sides of the cylinder, and then connect them with a smiley face. Notice all of my lines are super light because a lot of them will be erased. I make mistakes all of the time. Here is the horizon line, and this basically just separates whatever surface this is sitting on, like a table. Here I did wood grain. Separates that from the wall. So I opted for a nice clean look for the background. I didn't want anything too busy because I didn't want to distract the viewer from the main items in the foreground. Once we finish the basic shape of the cylinder, I'm going to do a couple of lines for texture showing the ridges in the soup can. And so these lines are curved like a smiley face, just like the one up here and the one down here. And that helps give it its shape and helps it look three-dimensional. So every soup can varies a little bit, but the ones that I typically use for this have 2 sections of 3 lines. Now I'm going to start with the items inside of the soup can. I'm going to do the ruler first because the ruler is the largest item, and then I can kind of place everything else around that. So my ruler comes up straight from the middle, and I'm going to actually cut it off right there, even though it realistically is a little bit taller than that. And here I am going to erase this line since this is in front of the back of that. You're not going to see this. The scissors are the second largest item in my picture, so I'm going to go ahead and add these next. So these can be tricky. If you draw light, you can always erase. And then once I complete those, I'm going to erase any unnecessary lines from there. You wouldn't be able to see any of those lines. Next, I'm going to add my Sharpie, and then I can just kind of overlap the other items as we finish up. Now that I've finished adding all of the details, I can go in and make sure I don't have any lines left that I need to erase. and that everything looks good and it's ready to outline. So I'm going to go ahead and use a couple of different Sharpies. I like the fine point one for small details, and I like the regular Sharpie, which I'm going to steal out of my display here, for the rest of it. So you can see these lines are a little bit thicker and the numbers on the ruler are a little bit thinner. So I'm going to outline everything as far as the art supplies go with the ultra fine, everything down here with the fine point. Now that I'm finished outlining with Sharpie, I'm going to do two more things with the Sharpie. The first is create a shadow to make this look realistic as if it's actually sitting on a table. So you're mimicking the shape of the can. So I'm going to assume the light is coming from this direction in the upper right corner. And I'm just going to have an extended line come this way and this way. This is all going to be colored with black Sharpie, and this part is also going to be colored with black Sharpie. So I'm going to use the fine point to color the background of this, and make sure you're absolutely positive which area is going to be the background of this can before you color it, because it can get a little bit confusing with all of these overlapping lines. It's very important to do that in pencil. Now that we've finished the drawing portion and Sharpieing, it's time to get started coloring. Like I said, you're able to use whatever supplies you want. So I have some crayons. I'll use the sharpened crayons for some of the smaller areas, some chalk pastels. That's what I used for the background. If you would like to use markers or colored pencils, you can also use those. It just depends what color you need and what supplies you have on hand. Now that we're finished adding all of the details and outlining with Sharpie, it's time to do this reflection on the aluminum can. So because of the glare of the light reflecting off of this cylinder, it appears that there's going to be these gray stripes down the middle of our can. So in order to achieve this effect, we're going to use some black chalk pastel, and I always use these chalk pastels laying down. So either break a small piece off, or you can use it lengthwise, but you're always using it laying down on its side. You're never using it drawing like you would with a crayon or a colored pencil. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create 3 horizontal lines. Maybe the first one might be wider, since it all just depends on how your light reflects off of your can. If you want to take a photograph of it like I did, that makes it really simple to see where the light is coming from and to help you draw from observation. So I'm going to have these 3 lines here, and the rest of it that's left white is actually going to be the reflection of this silver can. With chalk pastels, I always like to use paper towel to blend them. So I'm just going to use a paper towel, put my finger in the middle, and I'm going to use this to just blend this in to give it a nice soft look. Not too harsh. And you could probably even use less chalk pastel than I did, because this is turning out pretty dark. If you have charcoal at home, that also works really well for this. Vine charcoal is very soft. If you have any of that in any packs that you've received as gifts, that would be a perfect choice for this. And then what I'm also going to do with this leftover pastel that I have on here, I'm just going to kind of make sure that this can has a little bit of a gray to it, because we don't want it to be stark white, because we know that this can isn't really white. So we have some darker areas and some lighter areas, and if there's any areas that you want to really brighten up, an eraser actually takes this chalk pastel off really nicely. So now that we've finished this portion, you can use whatever materials you would like to color it. Colored pencils will help you get into small areas. Crayons will work really well. And what I used for the background was chalk pastels. That covers a large amount of area in a small amount of time. So if you're wanting to do that, make sure you're taking this chalk pastel and you're laying it down on its side, just like I showed you here. And you can just do that whole background really quickly. You can even blend a couple colors together to give it a different look. Feel free to get as creative as you want with the colors you choose and with the background. I'm going to post some examples from other first grade students so you can see the difference between theirs and mine. Thanks for stopping by to do this project with me today. I hope you learned some great skills about drawing from observation that you can use in the future.